and life and all of those good things. Okay, so that's all I got this morning besides my message. So we're in the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon. By the way, and I didn't mention this last week, in the Hebrew language, when you put two words together, like Song of Songs, it really is the superlative. That's how they would develop the superlative, which is the greatest of songs. Now, you don't call it the greatest of songs because no one would know what you're talking about. It's either the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon in our Bible translation. So I usually just refer to it as song. And today on our list in the folder that we have my messages in and a whole bunch of other stuff, it just said song in the verse reference. And so when our projectionist, Nick, he said, do you have your message in here? I said, yeah. I said, I can't see it, because he saw the word song and just thought it was one of Scott's songs. And so I realized I need to, call it Song of Songs or something to be helpful. Anyway, so we are in the second week of a 5-week series on the Song of Songs. I'm doing it as an assignment from the Lord, and because Bobby Connor was here back in May, and Bobby came up to me and said, and speaking from the Lord, when he said, I believe the Lord's in this, that you need to do a series on Song of Songs. Now, I don't know, how many of you have ever heard a series on the Song of Songs in church? I met with someone this week who said, I'm very impressed you're doing the Song of Songs. I'm not excited. I said, that's fair. I'm not excited either. I'm doing it as an assignment. However, if you were here last week, it's a powerful message of our relationship with Jesus Christ. And here's the interpretive layers that I'm just going to go through every week as we go through this, just so we are reminded. The very obvious first layer of the song is it's between Solomon and his bride, the Shulamite. Okay, this is someone who caught his attention in a big way. And so it's about their love affair, as a married couple, of course, but it's about their love affair. Okay. Second, it's reflecting God's relationship with his people. And of course, when it was first written, that'd be God and Israel. By the way, it's why Israel was always called an adulterer when it turned away from God. That relationship was being violated. It's interesting, in the book of Ezekiel, it says at one point God walked by and said, I saw that you were old enough for love. Okay. That means the same word for love is used in the Song of Songs to speak about intimate love. So God, when he looks at his people and he's talking about his people, the relationship of a man and his wife very much reflect God's relationship with his people, Israel, or Jesus' relationship with his bride. And that is as biblical as you get. So that is important for us to understand, because obviously that then gives us the grid work that we need to be able to understand, what is this song about? And people have struggled with it for years. Okay, so this is the third, ultimately a commentary on Christ and his bride. And fourth, it's just a reminder to Christian married couples. Last week we had that song, Our Bed is Fresh and Green. Keep your relationship fresh and green. Work on it. And we're going to see all the way through the Song of Songs that there's a developing and maturing relationship. And just like in a marriage relationship, in a human marriage relationship, there can be bumps along the way. And there can be a waxing and waning of affections. And I'm not saying commitment, I'm saying affections. There's a difference. Our commitment gets us through the waning of affections, just those times when we're having a bad day. And those days, and maybe, there's hormonal issues. There's whatever, okay? That stuff happens. We get up and down, okay? And so our commitment gets us through those things. Here's the key theme. I'm going to remind you of this. The Song of Songs is about God's pursuit of his people and his people's pursuit of him. It's both ways. This relationship of pursuit will result in a mature bride who reflects her husband's nature and character. That is the key theme. And when we get to the last section, we're going to see that come out in amazing fullness. And I didn't see it at first, but the Lord had to, I'm going to say wear me out, but you know what I mean by that. The Lord had to come in a dream and repeatedly focused me on one particular scripture until I got it. And then I the next day I really researched that verse in Song of Songs and saw that it really is the key that unlocks the whole book. And we'll get to that in chapter 8. So, the theme today, who is this who comes? Now, there's several times when today we got one of them, the who is this. There's another time we're talking about the bride, who is this, and then there's another time, there's two times, we're talking about the bride, who is this. And so the question is, who is or what is today, is I'll get through that whole thing. But we're going to talk about a growing relationship, and it's going to be portrayed between Solomon and his bride, but remember, always in the background is the picture of Jesus in us. Okay, so Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 8. As I pointed out last week, this is an earthy song. This is earthy. The rabbis would not let anybody read this who was under the age of 30, presupposing that by the age of 30 you were married. Seriously, they just wouldn't let anyone read it before then, because when you read it in the Hebrew and you realize the choices that you have in front of you for word meanings, and in the context of an erotic love poem, the choices get pretty graphic. They just would not let someone who was not 30 years of age and married read this poem in the Hebrew. Now remember, they didn't have like we do. We got Bibles everywhere. They had scrolls in the synagogue or in their places of study. They certainly could control who read it or not. So now we have the Shulamite speaking. Remember, that's one of the characters. Shulamite, one of the bride of Solomon, but in this song, but we find out she's not the only bride, of course. We all know about Solomon. But this was the one that had captured his heart, and that's the focus between these two. This is the one that Solomon and the Holy Spirit choose to epitomize as the relational thing between Christ and his church. So, Shulamite, we've just had that solemn warning. Don't awaken intimate desire before it's time. And last week I talked about the fact that so there are times, when the Holy Spirit comes, there's a presence that he brings that can be addictive. We had that last week in our worship outbreak that happened right at the end of worship, where all of a sudden you've got the power of God everywhere. We want that all the time. But then there's this mature thing that's got to develop too, where we go deeper in relationship with him by studying his word, learning who he is, getting to know his character. And I said last week, sometimes people get into an addictive thing with the presence of God and they never go any deeper. And that's awakening before it's time, that really deep, intense relationship that's experiential. We need to have our character developed through our relationship with God first before we just go after that. I've seen too many shipwrecks when we do it the other way. Okay, now, so the Shulamite, the voice of my lover. Look, he is coming, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. My lover is like a gazelle or a youthful stag among the stags. Look, he is standing behind our wall. He is watching through the windows. He is looking through the lattice. If it wasn't the story of a husband and wife and a husband coming to talk to his wife, it'd be a little creepy right here. But this is the husband coming to have a chat with his wife and give her an invitation. She, first of all, her ear is tuned to her lover. She hears his voice in the distance. Oh, man, it's him. And she's really excited. And, that's John 10:27, when you think about our relationship with Jesus. My sheep have come to know my voice. I know them and they follow me. We can be walking down the road and all of a sudden we hear the voice of Jesus and he reminds us, something. He can speak little bits of nothing into our ears, and yet it's never nothing. Because it's him. It's the God of the universe, the sovereign king, who's taking the time to whisper things to us. And as we grow in our relationship with him, we can discern his voice from all the other voices that are out there. Because there's voices everywhere that fill our head. There's our own, of course, but then there's, the spiritual airwaves are full. The second heavens are full of voices. And the second heaven is where Satan and his allies dwell. And the third heaven is where God dwells and wants to speak to us. He wants us to be able to hear him in spite of all the clutter between us and him. Because the third heaven, if you haven't noticed, is not next to the first heaven. Second heaven is between. And so we have to get good at discerning his voice. If you think every voice you hear is God, you're going to be a pretzel. You have to get good, because number one, when Satan's voice, when he got his agent speaking, he condemns. when you hear someone say, well, God told me to do this thing, and they do something absolutely wicked and awful that appalls the world, you can know that that wasn't God. They heard a voice of a demon, and they said that's God, as if God's the only voice. What a delusion. The Bible clearly shows there's more voices. So we got to make sure we're discerning the voice. Can you discern the voice? Well, is it in line with the Bible? That's the number one way. Is it in line with the Bible? And people that are not having a relationship with God hear a voice and they think, oh, it's God. A lot of those voices tell people to commit suicide. Because they're demons. They want to kill people, steal, kill, and destroy. And one of the things you can do for someone who's having suicidal thoughts is simply pray a prayer that block off those voices. Now realize it's not them. They're not having suicidal thoughts. They're having these outside bombardments coming against them all of the time. So Jesus said, my sheep have come to know my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And the Shulamite is modeling that. She's saying, whoa, I know Solomon's voice. And he's coming, and she's getting really happy about that. And then she, in her mind, thinks of Solomon as he's bounding toward her. He's leaping over the mountains because in all of his youthful vigor, he's a gazelle, a youthful stag that stands out among all the stags. This is poetic imagery, right? He wasn't scaling the mountains because he's bigger than that. He leaps over the mountains. So Solomon's eager to get to his bride. And then he gets there and he sees her and he's looking through the lattices. He doesn't even want to enter into the inner parts of the house. He just speaks to her through the lattice. My lover responds to me. That's what the Shulamite is saying. So now Solomon speaks. Arise, my intimate companion, my beautiful one, and come. For look, the winter is past, the rain is finished and gone by, the blossoms have appeared in the land. A time for singing has arrived. The voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree has brought forth her figs, and the blossom of the vines have released their sweet smell. And don't you want to go out and enjoy that? That's really, what a vivid picture of springtime. All of this beauty coming into the land. And so he's saying, hey, come on. This is a great time for us to step out into the land and enjoy what's going on. And so he's inviting the Shulamite to come with him. Come out from on the inside of that building and come with me and let's go out and enjoy the springtime together. And there's nothing quite like the springtime for love, right? That's in our culture. It's in just about every culture. That the springtime is a great time for people in relationship to step out and enjoy themselves. And they've got the scents and the breezes and the freshness, and it's wonderful, especially after there's been a season of winter. Now, this, by the way, can be in relationship, too. We talk about the springtime of a relationship when it's brand new, and they're still enjoying the springtime of their relationship. And the first blush of spring has arrived. And the invitation is come and enjoy it with me. And when we first step into relationship with Jesus Christ, as I said last week, that first blush of relationship, it's hard to get us to be quiet about that new relationship often. We want to tell people about it, and our unsaved relatives can get worn out by it, which is okay. It's part of the process. But then we learn to be able to accept the invitations of Jesus to spend time away with him. And that's an ongoing thing, because here's the thing. Jesus stands at the door and knocks at the church. Okay, he says, let me in. We're the church, by the way. It's not like a building. It's us. And so Jesus is knocking at the door, and so here he comes up to the lattice so he can be heard. Remember, they didn't have glazed windows. Okay? They would make a lattice to keep out stuff, and but he's saying, come on out and be with me. And Jesus is saying to us all the time, come on out and be with me. Now, here's the odd thing. Ready? A lot of times when he says, come on out and be with me, we're in bed. And it's the night seasons. And we have a decision to make, don't we? Are we going to get up and go out? Okay. Is it too inconvenient? Does the Shulamite look out and say, it's a little cloudy today. It could rain. Our joke is in Florida, Up north, when you were up north, people would be to church, rain or shine. But if it was snow, all bets are off. Okay, it's the way it is. And then I came to Florida and realized that they come to Florida shine or shine, or come to church shine or shine, and if it rains, all bets are off. And so because snow is our rain. Of course, we understand our rain comes down a little bit harder normally than it does up north. But are we willing to step into relationship with Jesus no matter what's going on, rain or shine, whatever? And one of the places that we step into relationship is when we come with his people, because his people are bringing him. And you just never know when God's going to speak to you through one of his people. He always does, by the way, and it's usually the person that you don't really like that much. And I mean, I'm saying that in reality because of the fact that God's going to test if your personal reaction to his vessel is going to trump his word. Do you hear his voice? Extremely important for us to understand that. Arise, come. This is Solomon saying. Arise, come, my intimate lover, my beautiful one, and come. My dove in the clefts of the rocks. How romantic. In the shelter of the cliff. Show me your figure. Let me hear your voice. For your voice is sweet and your figure is lovely. He's saying, come on out into the light. Let's go out and I can enjoy you. I can see your beauty and I can hear how lovely your voice is. And he is just trying to get her to come on out to meet with him so he can go out and enjoy the springtime together. And he continues praising her. It's kind of like, if I tell you all these good things, will you come outside? Because when she's in the house, it's like she's hidden in the cleft of a rock. That's what a dove would do, right? Hide in the cleft of a rock. Or in the shelter of a cliff. I'm kind of hidden. I'm in the shade. We're fine. And Solomon's saying, come on out in the sunlight. And Jesus does the same with us. And he showers us with words of love and affirmation so that we are able to continue to go out and to follow him. And his desire is to see his fruit being developed in our lives. So now the Shulamite says, because they're going out into the vineyards and the vineyards relationship. Remember I talked about that last week. Whenever they talk about the vineyards, it's talking about the intimacy between the two of them. And so then the Shulamite says, hold the foxes for us, the young foxes that are ruining the vineyards, and our vineyards are in blossom. My lover is mine and I am his. He grazes among the lilies until the day begins and the shadows flee. Move around, my lover. Be like a gazelle or a youthful stag upon the mountains of the valley. And so she's speaking about that time in the vineyards. They're going to spend some time together. And so she's saying, hold the foxes. And you say, what is that? Well, if you're in a vineyard, you don't want foxes. Okay? The vineyards are their intimate time together, and the foxes are the distractions that ruin the moments. All the distractions that can come against a married couple's relationship. It's very important, if you go out to dinner with your wife or your husband, make sure that your cell phone is on mute. If you got one of these that can also let you know the texts are coming in, mute it. Why? Because the most important, unless there's emergencies, of course, but the most important person that you can spend time with right now is sitting next to you at the table or across from you at the table. And you need to make sure that that's not distracting you. Dawn and I, when we go out to eat a lot, well, we don't go out to eat a lot, but when we do, before the waitress comes, we may be checking the things that we could have to take, and then we just put the stuff away. Because during the meal, we want to make sure that we're spending time with each other. That's the reason that we go out. I mean, we can eat food at home. But we can spend time with each other at a restaurant for other purposes, to get to spend time with each other so that our relationship stays fresh and green. And that's the same thing that we have to do with our relationship with Jesus Christ. Hey, there's so many distractions. I'll tell people we'll start worshiping, and then sometimes people come in 5 or 10 minutes after worship starts, and they begin greeting everyone. So this is what's going on. Oh, Jesus, you are wonderful. You are awesome. Oh, hey, good morning. Nice to meet you. Or see you. Okay, what happens is that you're being pulled right out of that connection with Jesus. And I'll stop someone from doing that. I'll talk to them and say, listen, you can't do that. You cannot do that, because you are taking the most important thing that's happening at that point while worship is going on is connecting with Jesus. And when we interrupt other people, and by the way, we're all guilty of it, but we have to make sure that we're working hard at not doing it, because the most important connection that is taking place is that connection with God. One of the reasons Bobby Connor, when he's here, he always says, don't multitask in the presence of God. That's the foxes. Okay, it's distracting you from the most important relationship that you have on earth. So, now, by the way, I knew I was preaching this today, right? But guess who didn't? Scott. And Scott and Debbie in their backyard today had this little critter show up. It's kind of a mange-ridden fox. It's got, and they did the internet search to make, was it a fox or a coyote? And I went, it's got to be a fox because it fits my message today. You guys ever see a fox in your backyard before? No. Okay, Scott and Debbie haven't either. But this morning, this showed up. I sent this already to the elders group with MorningStar. And the response was, wow, is that an affirmation of the message you're bringing today? And I said, you bet it is. I sent it to Bobby Connor, who's the one who's assigned me this, to do this. I said, this is a pretty good affirmation of the fact God sent a fox to our worship pastor's house, okay? Because it's a message. And the message is, don't let the little foxes ruin or distract you from growing in your relationship with Jesus Christ. I am telling you today, this is a word of God to each and every one of us, and he wanted to make sure that we did not miss it, that we do not allow ourselves to be distracted when we are going after God. Whether it's in worship or in teaching, we certainly structure things into our meeting as a way of people being able to interact with one another, but there's times that we just cannot allow distractions to take us out. And the sovereign God of the universe sent a fox into their yard so that we would get the message, and so that we'd also understand that this series really is from the Lord for this congregation. That this didn't happen last week, it didn't happen next week, it happened today when I am on that particular section of Scripture. Do not miss it. This is Jesus saying to New Dawn Community Church, pay attention to this entire series, but especially pay attention to this point right now. That's pretty incredible. It wouldn't go away, by the way. They said they'd knock on the window, it would go away and come back. Because those little foxes are out there trying to distract, trying to take you away from the things that God is doing. This is an amazing thing that happened. It's amazing that God did that so that we would get the point that he's involved with us. He's intimately involved. I know many of you don't know where they live. How a fox gets as far inland, away from it's amazing. But I mean, they're everywhere. We've had them around us, not in our backyard. We had some at the front door once, but they were kits, and their mama was expired, so they were kind of wandering around aimlessly. Okay, the foxes are distractions that ruin the moments. Hold them. This is the lover saying, hold them back. Do not let them into our vineyard. Don't let them distract us from one another. And the Shulamite saying, I am so excited. My lover is mine and I am his. She's saying, there's this relationship that they have. Now let's go beyond the male-female relationship here. Let's go. This is Jesus. Jesus is saying, you're mine. And we can say, he's mine and I'm his. We have a relationship with Jesus Christ. We are connected to him. He's the vine, we're the branches. And we have a life relationship with him that needs to continue to grow so we can get more life through us into the world in which we live. That's the purpose. So we can have the same excitement. Wow, we get a chance to connect with the Lord today. There are times when I get up in the mornings, or no, there's times when I go to bed at night and I think, Lord, I am just excited to see if you're going to give me anything tonight. Are you going to give me a dream and a vision? Are you going to give me whatever? I'm like everyone else, but don't wake me up too much. But or when I get up in the morning, there's times I'm very excited because I get to step in. My first thing I do in the morning is spend time with the Lord after I make my cup of coffee. Because I have to be awake enough to spend time with the Lord. Coffee is a sign that God loves us. And he wants us to be awake for our devotions. Chapter 3. Okay. This is the first, if you want to think about the first test that the Shulamite went through right now, was the test of will you respond to the invitation, right? She got through it. This is test number 2. Will we pursue the relationship? Because here she is, she's by herself. It's not the only time in this song she's by herself. Upon my bed at night I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him but did not find him. Let me arise now and walk around in the city, in the streets and in the plazas. Let me seek the one my soul loves. I sought him but did not find him. Those who keep watch doing their rounds in the city found me. I asked, have you seen the one whom my soul loves? So this is the test of absence. It's, if the lover doesn't show up, is she going to be interested enough in him to pursue? And I am telling you that there are times in our relationship with the Lord where he purposely is absent. And it feels like our devotions can be dry as dust. Or it feels like our worship times can be drier than normal. And we say, well, that's a test of absence. Are we going to continue to pursue him? Or are we going to take our marbles and go home? Well, if God doesn't want to be with me, I don't want to be with him either. Okay, this is the picture. Okay, it's a new scene. This is a whole new poem. This is set up in a series of vignettes or poems, and so now this is a new scene that is coming in. They're back in Jerusalem. She is in bed. It's nighttime. She's expecting her lover to show up. He doesn't. So she's like, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Remember, this is a young couple in the throes of brand new love and relationship, and she expects him to be with her in the nighttime, and he's not there. Now what? And by the way, that's our relationship with Jesus the King. When it's a brand new relationship, it's like, man, in just a moment I can just focus on him, and he's there. I can sense his presence. And then there's other times that it's like, wow. I mean, you all have had devotion times that you go, this is dusty. You got to blow the dust off the Bible. It's like there's nothing happening here. And the only reason you're continuing is that you're still pursuing. You're pursuing, and you hope it doesn't last a long time. But because of the fact that you know that it will end and you'll get into that place of intimacy with him again, you just keep pursuing and you keep up the relational search. And that's what she does. She keeps up the relational search, and she goes out and while she's searching, she the first time around, there's twice she runs into the watchman of the city. First time around, she gets a pass. By the way, the watchman of the city did not normally like it when people, especially women, were walking around by themselves at night. What was a woman doing out walking around at night? There were only certain types of women who did that. Okay, so she apparently, because she approached them and said who she was looking for, that they let her go, because it's not necessarily good otherwise, but they said, okay, they gave her a pass on this one because she was pursuing her lover, and it was a test of absence. And so there's going to be pressing in, not a lot of opposition in the sense of those who oppose, but in the beginning parts of the relationship. A moment after I passed by them, I found the one whom my soul loves. I held him and did not stop until I had brought him to the house of my mother and to the room of the one who conceived me. I earnestly urge you all, daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the deer of the field, do not arouse, do not stir up intimate desire until love can take pleasure in it. Second warning, second warning now. And it really ends this particular poem, but we're going to continue because there's another little poem vignette we're going to get into. But she found who she was seeking. She found Solomon, and she was excited about having found him. She brought him to a private place. That place where her mother conceived her. There's a whole lot of discussion about what that means and what it was like in the culture, etc. It's a private place. That's what's being discussed. A private place. Where did this scene start out? It started out with her in her bed alone. Now she's out in the city and she's away from her place, so she goes to some other private place where there is an opportunity for them to be alone. And then the solemn encouragement again, this is such a powerful desire. Do not step into it before your time. And I've already spoken about that, what that means for Christians. Now I'm going to just take it a step further for Christians. We have to make sure we can follow through. When people step into relationship with Jesus Christ, it really does cost us everything. And if we step into the relationship not realizing it's going to cost us everything, all of our own self-will, Jesus said that you would take up your cross and follow him. In fact, this is Luke 14:27-30. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me is not able to be my disciple. This is Jesus speaking. For who from among you, wanting to build a watchtower, doesn't first sit down and calculate what it will cost to see if he has enough to finish it? He does this so that he does not lay the foundation only to find he does not have the ability to complete it. When everyone sees it, they will begin to mock him and say, this man began to build but did not have the ability to complete it. And so Jesus starts out by saying, hey, you need to understand, you need to take up your cross. And let me explain to you, you need to sit down and consider what it means to take up your cross and follow me, because it means your self-will. And I mean, literally, this is the picture I get in my mind. Someone says, I think I'm going to follow Jesus, but the first thing I'm going to do is sit down. I'm going to write down all the things that I really want in life. I'm going to write down everything I really want in life. Then I'm going to look at that list and say, am I willing to give it all up for Jesus if he requires it of me? Doesn't say he will require it of you, but are you willing to give it up? That's what he's saying. Calculate the cost of what it means to step into relationship with Jesus. Continuing in Luke 14, or what king is going to meet another king in battle and does not first sit down and take counsel about, if he can, with 10,000 men engaged in hostilities against the one coming against him with 20,000 men? If not, while he's still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. In justice way, any of you who does not leave all you have that is your own is not able to be my disciple. Okay, it means making that list and saying, am I able to leave that all behind if I'm called? Because I put it at his service. And that's why this solemn statement in the Song of Songs is so important. Until you're in a place that you can say, that is what I'm willing to do for this relationship, it's not time to make deeper commitments, because you're not gonna follow through. And then there's those shipwrecks, and I talked about that. It's the people shipwreck their lives because the Lord calls them to give up things, and they just simply say, no, I'm not doing that. And they go right into the rocks. And we have to be able to say, Lord, you are worth everything. You are worth everything. God, you all have made decisions. If you are someone who's being brought forth into a relationship with Jesus Christ, after any period of time, there's things that you've had to lay down. And you haven't wanted to. But you do. And what I mean wanted to is it's your desire. You would rather do this or not do this. Because sometimes he calls you to do things you'd rather not do. Your desire is just to say, quiet, stay over here, quiet, unassuming, and he's saying, no, I need you to do this. And you're going, no, I'd rather not do that. But you give up your own desire, and you go do what he's called you to do. That's what the solemn encouragement is about. So now the daughters of Jerusalem, this is another vignette. We've just had that little vignette. We've done another fade away from the young couple together. We've already done this once, and now we're faded away again, and there's a new vignette, a new little poem that is brought forward, and it kind of explains the situation for us a little bit about between Solomon and the Shulamite. What is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the scented spices of the traders? Look, it is the sedan chair of Solomon. 60 mighty men surrounded of the mighty men of Israel. All of them are holding a sword. All are skilled in battle, each man with his sword on his thigh against the dread of the night. Ooh, it's a picture of Solomon. Now, by the way, this is one you could translate. Some of your translations may translate, who is this coming up from the wilderness? However, this is feminine. And it's either talking about the bride or it's talking about his sedan chair. And it's his chair. That's how I've chosen it. It's his chair. Okay, this can be attached to the chair, which is feminine in nature, and it makes more sense. Those who say that it's talking about the bride, or maybe Solomon and his bride are together in the sedan chair, it gets into deep weeds. So this is the most natural way to take it, and many translations take it this way. What, not who. What is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke? This is talking about victory, okay? He's coming up from the wilderness victorious. To me, this is a picture of Christ coming out of the temptations, okay? He's coming out after Satan has the 40 days in the wilderness. He's come out victorious. He's about to step forward on behalf of his people into the ministry that he has been called. This is a picture of Solomon coming out. This is a picture of Jesus and his victory. Wow, this is cool, everything that is going on. He's coming from the wilderness victorious, and Solomon's palanquin. And you look at that and say, is that how you pronounce that? Yeah. Palanquin. By the way, if you look at that last word where you can say quin, and we like to say quin when we see QUI, and so you can say palanquin, have fun. But the international pronunciation, which most people use, is palanquin. Palanquin. Don't get a qui in there. Okay, so anyway, that's what a sedan chair is. And you say, really? I said, yeah, really. Here they are. Here's a couple. The top one is the king of Thailand being coronated in 2019. That's a pretty splashy little scene there, isn't it? This is kind of what it would have been with Solomon coming up out of the wilderness, okay? That is, the full retinue, the 60 warriors around him, except in the haze of coming up out of the wilderness and all there's like a smoke and a haze around him. It would have been far more ethereal than this. But that's kind of the scene right there, if you think about it. It may have been, it appears to be one that was enclosed, though, which is what the bottom one is. That, by the way, is a traditional marriage ceremony and among a Hindu group, and that is taking place in Minnesota. Okay. Just thought I'd throw you off there. A traditional Hindu wedding in Minnesota, where the bride is being brought to the home of the husband in her own palanquin. Okay, so that's the picture. Solomon's coming up victorious, and he's stepping into his place. King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair from the trees of Lebanon. He made its posts of silver, its seat back of gold, its seat of purple. Its interior is inlaid with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Go out, daughters of Zion, and look upon King Solomon with the nuptial crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of his heart's elation. It's looking back to the beginning of the relationship with the Shulamite and how he had come out victorious from the wilderness, as Christ came out victorious from the wilderness, and then for 3 years served so that he'd be able to step into a relationship with his bride. And his vehicle was suffering and obedience. That was Christ's vehicle during those 3 years, his obedience and then his suffering, obeying the Father every step of the way and wooing his bride. And we still read those gospel stories and we fall in love with Jesus all over again. because of the things that he did and said as he wooed his bride. And we're his bride. It captures our heart every time we read it. And his obedience, his suffering, his way of loving on people, all of that captures him. That was his vehicle. And Solomon had his vehicle, and it says the daughters of Zion helped build it with love. And all the disciples around Jesus helped him build his vehicle as he went forward. And then they took it on after he ascended into heaven. So the making of his sedan chair, the daughters of Jerusalem participate in building, and then they say, "Go out, daughters of Zion, and look upon King Solomon with his nuptial crown," the crown that he got on his wedding, that Bathsheba crowned him with, of course, that's his mom, and on the day of his heart's elation. This is what we do when we say to people, "Let me tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you, you need to look at him. You need to recognize who he really is." His heart's elation was when he ascended on high and he was able to take control of the church, to be able to rule all things on our behalf. His heart's elation is that he works with us and we are able to produce fruit on his behalf. He is working on our behalf all of the time. This to me, when you look at the Song of Songs, and now we're just through the second message, when you look through the Song of Songs, and you see how obvious now it lays out in the relationship between God and his people. And you say to yourself, wow, this really does make sense, that this is about God's relationship with his people. And it certainly is clear from the prophetic scriptures I mentioned earlier, but it's also clear because of just the internal consistency of the book as we look at how it applies to Christ and his church. Solomon, remember who he was? David wanted to build a temple. And God said to Nathan, Nathan says, "Go ahead." And God says, "Whoa, whoa, 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 no. And he says, "I'm going to build a dynasty for you. One of your sons is going to build the temple." And it's clear that Solomon was a picture of the Messiah who would come and sit on David's throne forever. Solomon was the first fulfillment of the prophecy to David. He built the temple. But Jesus was the fulfillment of the one who is building his temple in us. So this is why this is obviously God's intent as he uses Solomon as the picture to remind us of who Jesus is and what he has done in our lives. So, let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity that we have had to look at this second part of the Song of Songs and be reminded once again about what it means to keep our relationship with you fresh and green. You've introduced a new theme today, the one of attesting through absence. What will be our response when things are dry as dust or when they aren't the same as they used to be? As in any relationship, we are tested through those times of absence. And I ask that you would help us to respond every time by seeking even more for you. In your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen.